Well, I'm joined now by Dana White. Dana, I've got to say that when my three sons, who are all mad UFC fans, when they heard I was interviewing you, I don't think I've ever heard them either more excited about a guest or prouder of their father. So for that alone, thank you.
Well, thank you. And tell them thanks for the support.
I took them all to the big McGregor-Mayweather fight down in Vegas, which presumably lined your pockets in the process. And it wasn't probably a perfect example of what you're about, really. It was an incredible theatre. It involved two supreme champion fighters, albeit in different disciplines. And I found it a riveting thing to watch, albeit it ended how I suspected it was always going to end. But that, to me, in a nutshell, was you all over. Vegas, high drama, high theatre, specialist pugilists at their very best, and a kind of unique encounter.
Yeah, what we try to do is try to give the best experience that we can for fans, either live or on television. It's the thing that I focus on the most. When you come to a live UFC event or an event that we're putting on, most people don't walk out and say, yeah, I don't ever want to see one of these again.
No, I mean, my sons, as I say, they got me into it, and I quickly became gripped. I loved it. In fact, I sat next to Khabib at an Arsenal match recently, and we had a long chat. And he was unbeaten and an absolute titan of the sport, but he was fascinating about it all and about you. I may come to a bit of that later. But I've certainly become a great convert to it as a sporting spectacle. I think there's very little stuff like it. The thing that is intriguing about you to me is where you came from to get to where you've got to. When you look back at your journey, you know, you were born in 1969 to a 19-year-old high school dropout mum. You had a 21-year-old alcoholic father who left the home, I think, when you were 7 or 8 years old. You worked your way through some pretty tough early years, had no silver spoon, no great privilege, and yet here you are now, sitting here talking to me from this gym, and you've got a multi-billion-dollar business that's made you both extremely rich, very successful, but I'd imagine also for you yourself, that journey must be incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, it's been amazing, actually. You know, as I look back on my life and you know where I started and where I am today, it's been amazing. But I love it so much that, you know, I'm 54. I just turned 54 years old in July, and you know, I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface of what's left to do in this business and in this sport. But it's definitely been an incredible journey.
You were a road paver, a bouncer, a hotel bellman, and an apprentice boxing trainer. You've done a few things in your time. When you were doing those things, did you have a big dream?
Yeah, well, I think when you're young, those are all the type of jobs you have to do. Number one, to find out what hard work really is, and number two, to find out what it is you don't want to do in life. So I was very lucky that I had all those experiences, and by the age of 19, I figured out, didn't want to do any of that, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in the fight business, which at the time, you know, was 1988 or 1989, sounded like the dumbest idea ever. But when you love something and you're very passionate about it, you know, and you know exactly what it is you want to do, you just get up every day and start grinding until it happens.
You come from an Irish Catholic background, as I do, and you were taught by nuns when you were younger, as I was. I had spiritual guidance from nuns. How did that impact you?
I don't know. Went to Catholic school and you know, had to go to church and all that stuff growing up. I was an altar boy when I was younger. I don't know if that affected me in a positive way toward religion, but you know, I'm not a very religious person these days. I would say it's weird because there's some things that I don't believe in much, but I believe in karma for some reason. I never really was guided by religion in any way, shape, or form as I got into my 20s.
What do you think happens to you when you die?
I think that it's it. It's over. I think that we think we're more important than we really are, because some people have to believe that to get through life. I'm not one of those people that has to believe that. listen, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I'd say the real answer for me is I don't know, but I don't let that guide me, and I don't let it, just be a good person. You can figure out being a good person without having to believe in anything, in my opinion.
When you look again at your trajectory to where you've got to, it was a wonderful report that you have $100,000 a year that you spend on sneakers. A, is that true? And B, did you ever think you'd get to a place where you could spend $100,000 a year on sneakers?
No, I actually never really thought about that ever. And I didn't even realize it until we did that complex story and we started talking about how much money I'd spent on sneakers over the last year. But yeah, no, not anything I ever thought of, and didn't think about it until it came up in that interview.
Your relationship with your parents, obviously complicated, difficult. I know you don't particularly like talking about that. I don't want to pry into that, other than to just ask whether it's had a material effect on you as a person. Do you think a lot of the drive that you have comes from those difficulties and those difficult relationships?
You're right, I don't like talking about it, but it's a great question, and I would say yes, absolutely. My relationship with my parents has definitely, made me who I am today in many different ways, not just, in life and in business, but as a father too. So I wouldn't change my upbringing, not one thing about it. I wouldn't change any of it. So, yeah, great question, and I agree with you.
Has it made you a better father yourself, do you think, a better parent?
100%. 100%. My parents taught me a lot about what I didn't want to be as a parent, and yeah. And I don't really talk about, I don't think I've ever talked about this, but my parents both died recently. So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's yeah. I don't like talking about it, but yeah, my parents died recently, and
how did that make you feel, given how difficult things have been?
Holy shit, this is where we're going with this interview, huh? I don't, I'm good with it. I'm good with everything. I focus a lot on my kids and my relationship with them. And I've sort of put my relationship with my parents behind me.
Did you feel sad when you knew they died? Or did you feel it was the end of a...
No, I didn't wish any ill will on either one of my parents, but, no, I didn't. When they passed away, I had almost no feelings about it, to be honest with you.
You didn't go to their funerals, either of them?
Yeah, listen, I took care of my father and moved him up to Maine and put him to rest with his family up there. And then my mother, I had nothing to do with any of hers. Her family handled, her when she passed away.
I mean, it's an extraordinarily sad part of your life. And obviously I didn't know that your parents had both died recently. And I thank you for sharing that. Very private information. I appreciate it. But I am curious as to, you acknowledge that the drive that you have, a lot of that may have come from this quite rough time you had. But do you feel a great loss that you didn't have the love of your parents that many other people take for granted?
You sound like my wife.
I don't mean to. Well, actually, maybe I do.
No, I did not feel that way, and but there's no doubt about it. I cannot deny the fact that the way that I am built and the drive and all the things that I have definitely come from the relationship that I had with my parents. There's no doubt about it. But no, I have no remorse. I don't feel bad about the way that I grew up. I mean it when I say that I wouldn't change one thing about the way that I was brought up, because I truly believe had I not had them for parents, had I not had the upbringing that I did have, that I wouldn't be who I am today.
What are the things, Dana, what are the things that it taught you not to do as a parent? And what are the things that it taught you to do as a parent?
Yeah, I think that the to-dos is I'm here for my kids. I've been married for almost 30 years. You go through a lot of things in a marriage. I mean, I just went through some stuff last New Year's Eve. These things happen. What you don't do is you don't leave. You don't quit. You don't give up, and you stay. You don't stay together just for your children, but you stay. I made a commitment. 22 years ago, I had my first son, and there's a commitment there to everybody that's involved. And, I've stayed in there. I'm always there for my kids, anything that they ever need. My father taught me, what it feels like to not have a father there at the house, what it's like to not have that person around all the time when you need them. And I would never do that to my kids.
You said a great quote. You talked about my legacy to me is when I drop dead and my kids are at my funeral. I want my 3 kids to get up and say, he's an awesome dad. Is that ultimately, in the end, the real litmus test of success for you? I've seen other people say, actually, if in the end your kids, when they get old enough to make that decision for themselves, if they still want to be around you and they still love you and they still care about you and they would speak at your funeral in a positive way about you, that in the end, that's the ultimate litmus test of success, far more than any financial benefits or gains or fights or whatever it may be.
Well said. I couldn't have said that better myself. You're absolutely right. Everybody's always asking about legacy, your legacy. What you did for a living isn't your legacy. Your legacy is your children and their children and how they feel about you, how they feel about... Listen, we all make mistakes and we all fail in life at many different things. My opinion is the one thing that you can't fail is being a parent. It's the ultimate failure. It's what showed that you really weren't focused on the right things in your life if that's what you failed at.
When you referenced the incident on New Year's Eve, and obviously it went viral, everyone saw the video footage and so on, you were very contrite after that. But was the hardest thing of that actually having to talk it over with your kids?
100%. I mean, everybody was acting like there needs to be some big apology to the world. No, the apology was to my kids, for me and my wife. Nobody wants to see their dumb, drunk parents slapping each other on TMZ. You know what I mean? Our oldest son didn't talk to us for like 4 days, and and the other kids had to deal with some stuff too. It's embarrassing, and the only apology that needed to be made was to our children, and the only relationships that needed to be handled immediately was between us and our kids, and we did it, we handled it, and we got through it as a family.
What was it like for you, having seen so many fighters get into scrapes and having to deal with the fallout of that? What was it like for you to suddenly be on the receiving end yourself of that kind of attention? Yeah,
it's definitely not fun, but it's something that, as a man, you have to stand up and you have to deal with it and handle your business, take your lumps, and deal with whatever comes with it. And but like I said, the most important part of it is to handle it as a family first. As long as you get your family straight, I could give a shit what everybody else thinks.
Did you worry during that whole episode that you may lose everything that you'd fought so hard to build?
Nah. The people that are around me, again, when you're talking about something like this that happens, and you're talking about what everybody else, the whole world is looking at you and saying, the people who know me, and the people the circle that I keep, I've had for, 40 years. So, the people that I cared the most about, I knew it was going to be whatever. Everybody else, I could care less what everybody else thinks.
I want to go back to the start of UFC, because you had a couple of investor friends. They bought the franchise off you for $2 million. You'd come to Vegas. But how you got to Vegas is fascinating, because you were basically chased out of town by the mafia, by Mr. Bulger, who was, of course, a very famous mafia mobster. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it wasn't him. It was some of his guys that worked under him. But yeah, I mean, I was in Boston in the early 90s, and that stuff was real back then. I mean, if you watch any of the movies or any of the documentaries that came out about it, I lived in South Boston, Massachusetts, and that stuff was very real. And at the time, they had felt that I owed them some money that I felt I didn't owe, and I was either going to pay it or I wasn't going to pay it. But right when I left and came back to Vegas, it was like the summer of '95. And then right after that is when all the stuff started to unravel for him. And, he basically went on the run after that. And now, I mean, we had a fight in Boston a couple weeks ago. I mean, it's not even the same city. It's completely different. And South Boston is not the same place it was in the 80s and early 90s.
But that moment when Whitey Bulger's people say, we want $25,000, I think it was, by tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And you know that if you don't give them that money, that's probably the last call you're getting from them. It might be the last call you ever have. What does that feel like?
Yeah, I don't know if that would have actually, and it wasn't $25, it was $25,000, it was $2,500, which
right.
Might as well have been $25,000 to me back then. But when I go back there now and look at it at that place and at that time, you realize what a scary place that really was at that point in time. But I didn't really feel that way when I was in my early 20s, I don't know how that would have played out, but I can tell you this. I got the call, I hung up the phone, picked it back up, and called Delta and got a one-way ticket back to Vegas. And what's funny is everything in life is about timing, It was the time for me to come back to Vegas for all of this stuff to align and to happen. So earlier, you and I were just talking about religion and what you believe and what you don't. It's just crazy the way that things work out and how things are kind of meant to be and what will put you on these different paths in life. It's fascinating.
You've turned a business that you managed to find two investor friends, to spend $2 million buying the UFC franchise off you. But it was a very basic franchise at the time. One octagon and a few bits and pieces around it. Today, that business is worth $12 billion. It's made you incredibly rich in the process, obviously. But my simple question is, how? How did you do this?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Yeah, when we originally bought the company for $2 million, we had a few contracts. When I say a few, maybe 8 to 15 contracts, and an old wooden octagon, and those 3 letters UFC. That was it. The former owner had basically stripped all the rights and sold everything off to try to keep the thing alive. But what we did was we came in, we started to acquire some of these rights back from other companies that had bought them. We started to build, the trademark back and the brand. And we had a vision for this thing. We were big fight fans, and we believed that if this was done the right way, this could be the biggest sport in the world. I always had this philosophy about fighting, that it doesn't matter what color you are, what country you come from, or what language you speak, we're all human beings. Fighting's in our DNA. We get it and we like it. It doesn't have to be explained to anybody. And when you have the right fight in the right place at the right time, like you were just talking about earlier with Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather, everybody wants to watch it everywhere, all over the world.
Yeah.
Now we're getting to a place with streaming where that's actually starting to become possible, where we can put on a fight out here in America and the whole world can watch it at the same time on the same network. So the ceiling on this thing is what? 8 billion people are in the world. As you continue to grow the sport, this thing can actually become the biggest sport in the world. And we saw that from day one. The question was, is the timing right? And thank God it was.
Well, there were 2 politicians who had interesting takes on what you were doing. In 1996, Senator John McCain, who was a huge boxing fan, but he railed against the UFC on the floor of the US Senate. He called it human cockfighting. And he sent letters to the governor of every state asking them to ban it. And then Donald Trump came along, right when the whole business may have been up for grabs. It may not have flown, it may just have sunk. And Donald Trump turned up and stayed late at one of your events. And he carried on supporting you. And you stayed friends ever since. And I've been friends on and off, I have to say, with Trump over the years. We've had good times and bad. But I've seen the good in him. One of those good traits is tremendous loyalty. How important... Well, first of all, tell me about John McCain. How did you feel when he called it basically cockfighting?
Yeah, that happened before we bought the company. So that was one of the uphill battles that we had. Obviously, Senator John McCain did everything for the right reasons. He wanted this thing to be regulated by the Athletic Commission, rules in place and referees and judges and proper medical testing and all that stuff. We agreed with Senator John McCain when we bought the company, and we ran toward regulation, and we wanted to get this thing regulated by all the athletic commissions, not only in the country, but throughout the world. And then, Donald Trump, when we bought the company, venues didn't want this. There were no venues that wanted this thing. Now, we break every venue record all over the world, and venues everywhere want us to come. But in the beginning, nobody did. But Donald Trump saw this thing early, saw that he thought it could be successful. When you think about it, the Trump brand was here. The UFC brand was here. And he brought us in, cut us a great deal, showed up to the first fight, stayed to the last fight for both of the events that we put on in his casino. And everything that ever happened to me throughout the rest of my career, Donald Trump was the first guy to either pick up the phone and call and say congratulations or write a note and send something. He was always that guy. Then Donald Trump and his son got in and actually started to compete with the UFC. So with another company. And you would always have these media people trying to put me against Trump and say, and my whole thing was, I will never say anything bad about this guy. He was extremely good to me, not only in the early days, but throughout the rest of my career. And, that's all that stuff is what started the incredible relationship that I have with Donald Trump.
I mean, I've seen the good side of Trump, and we've all seen some of the bad side of him. You've remained, for reasons you've explained, extremely loyal to him. How hard is that sometimes to do that publicly?
It's not hard at all, because how I judge people is how my relationship is with them. I can have a friend that 15 other people don't like for whatever reason. I judge them off their relationship with me. And I can tell you from personal experience, Donald Trump has never been anything but loyal and incredible and an amazing friend to me.
Do you think he can become president again?
I do. I mean, people thought he couldn't become president the first time, and he did. I absolutely think he could do it again. Listen, the forces are fighting against him. They're trying to do everything they can to make sure that this guy does not even have a chance to be elected again. But yes, I mean, a majority of the country wants this guy to be the next president of the United States.
How often do you talk to him?
I talk to him several times a month. I just talked to him last week. He and I are very close. We're very good friends. I consider him a very good friend of mine, and we talk a lot.
What do you talk about?
Fights. He's a fight fan. He's a fight freak. He loves fights. Mostly what we talk about is fights. He's a fight fan, and we talk about other things, family and stuff like that too, but mostly we talk about fights.
Well, I got to know him on Celebrity Apprentice, which I ended up winning, knocking out Lennox Lewis, by the way, on my way to victory, which remains one of the all-time great pugilist achievements. But one of the early contestants who I knocked out much earlier was Tito Ortiz, who turned out to be one of the first big-name fighters that you had.
Yep, him and Chuck Liddell were two of the big stars for us when we first bought the company.
How important was it to have people like that who could energize the sport for you, who were showmen?
That's what this business is all about. Basically, it's about, early on in the early days, when people doubted this business, doubted this sport, they would talk about, what are you going to do when this guy retires? What are you going to do? I've been hearing that stuff for, 15 years, when we first started the company. But one of the things that I have been really good at is finding new talent, building them into stars. And look at what Conor McGregor, you were just saying it earlier too. Look what he did for Europe and other parts of the world. When you find these guys, we've got a star that breaks in Brazil. You got a star that breaks in Canada. You know, the UK, Australia right now is on fire for us. That's basically what this business is all about, is star building.
And it's extremely lucrative. Like I've said several times, it's made you very rich. Is money important to you? I know deal making is important, but is the actual money, is that a big motivator for you?
It never has been. It's never been a huge motivator for me. If money was the big motivation for me, I probably would have retired in 2016. But no, it's not. Taking the sport to the level that we're taking it to, there's still a lot of work to do here at the UFC to get to where I envision this being from day one. And yeah, no, it's when you do what you love to do. I like breaking records. That's what I like to do. I like doing things that people say can't be done. And when you do those things, money is just what happens.
But do you know how much you're worth?
Not to the penny. I have an idea, but no, I don't really focus on that.
I mean, if you were to fall over tomorrow, God forbid, and something terrible happened to you, I mean, what, here lies Dana White. He was worth, boom. What would that figure look like?
Yeah, if I drop dead tomorrow, I think my family's going to do okay. They're going to be all right. They're going to make it.
Forbes said $500 million. Are they grossly underestimating your fortune?
Let me tell you this. When you go online and you type in what somebody's net worth is, every single one of them are bullshit unless it's like, so you handed in your information to Forbes and Forbes did a whole audit of what you're worth. All bullshit. Everything you see online about people's net worth.
What I really like about you, Dana, and your story is that it's a story of resilience, of determination, of getting yourself back on your feet when you've been knocked down, all the kind of Rocky Balboa things that he says in that infamous speech, or famous speech, to his son, who's being a spoiled brat, and he finally has it out with him in the street. I've seen you say that you think America, and probably the wider world actually, has gone soft, and I agree. I think it has gone soft. I think we've become a world where virtue signaling is more important than reality, where facts no longer matter. You can all pretend to be whatever you want and everyone has to go along with it, where everyone's offended by absolutely everything. How have we got to this place? And what's the way out of this kind of woke hell that we're having to endure?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely how I feel. And I can't speak for the rest of the world because I didn't grow up in any of these other places, but I can definitely speak on America. America has become so soft, it's actually, it's a problem. And I tell kids all the time, if you even have this much savage in you, everything out there right now is for the taking. There was a point in time in the United States where you would look at different businesses and say, God, it's almost impossible to break into this business because it's been so established. And even the companies, all these companies that are so soft right now, everything out there is for the taking. If you have even this much savage in you, if you are willing to go out there and grind and work hard, you got these people that don't want to go to work, they want to stay home and work from home and all that. And believe me, I've seen this when I've spoke before. I see it pop up in the comments, all these people saying, you're wrong. No, things can be done from home. No, it can't. You have to be in the building with like-minded people. You know how much stuff that I have on my agenda every day that needs to be done, but other things that pop up in the office and you get a bunch of smart, hardworking people in a room together and you go on a completely different, You have to have people in the office working every day. And these people that don't want to, stay home, man. Stay home and do your thing. Good luck to you. I wish you all the luck in the world. There's going to be a small group of hungry savages out there that are going to run every one of you over. And you can sit home and you can cry and complain about how you didn't get yours and it's because this person had this opportunity that you didn't have. It's all bullshit, crybaby stuff that's going on in the whole world, like you said, but more so in the United States like I've never seen before.
I read a great profile of you by the Financial Times, and the writer had clearly gone in with a kind of idea that maybe you were going to be some kind of egotistical monster, whatever, but he found the complete opposite. And he told some really interesting stories, one of which was as you were coming out of the pandemic, or in the middle of the pandemic, how you got all your team together, 300 people, I think, and you said, there's absolutely no way I'm going to start cutting you off, firing a lot of people to save money. We're going to get through this together. And apparently the reaction from your staff was extraordinary. How important was that moment for you to prove yourself as a boss in the tough times as well as the good?
Yeah, it's so true. It's like, the UFC has been this rocket ship of success since 2005, right? And nobody does anything by themselves. You build a great team around yourself, smart, talented, hardworking people who sacrifice every day. They didn't see their kid's football game, or they didn't go to this play because they're out working hard to build the sport and build the company, right? Now, you're going to tell me COVID comes. COVID never really made sense to me, from the beginning. The first day when everything started to shut down and it was getting weird, I got all my employees together and I said, listen, I don't know what's going on. I can't explain. I don't have the answers for you. But if any of you are scared or feel like your life is in danger, or somebody at home might be in danger, you guys can go home and do whatever you have to do. My team is a bunch of solid, they couldn't be any more solid. And I tell these people how much I love them all the time. So what you're going to tell me is the first time that we ever face adversity, right? We're facing real adversity here. I'm going to start laying these people off in the scariest time in the history of the world. Good luck to you. We got to save the bottom line over here. I will never pick money over people. So I was willing to give up my salary, my bonus, whatever it was going to take to make sure that everybody was comfortable that we could take care of the employees. And then I started trying to find a way to go through COVID. This is America. We've been doing this since the day this country started, is solving problems. You have to figure out, here's the problem, how's there a solution? Now in Abu Dhabi, these guys were way ahead of the curve. They were testing, they were doing all this stuff. Well, if they can test, we can test. We can figure this out. So that was always my thought process going through it. There was no way I was going to let go of my employees during the scariest time of our lifetime. We were going to stick together and we were going to fight through this together, or we were all going to sink together. That's how it was going to go.
You talked about Abu Dhabi there in the Middle East, and you're a big fan of a lot of what goes on in the Middle East, particularly in sport and other things. They're obviously getting more and more dominant now in sports like golf, with the Saudi Live League. You now have the Saudi Football League, led by Cristiano Ronaldo, but loads of top stars going out there. I'm a good friend of Cristiano, and I've been following this journey with him with great fascination. It's taken a lot of blowback from people who say we shouldn't be allowing the Saudis or other Middle Eastern countries who have bad human rights records to be doing this to sport. What's your view?
Yeah, my relationship has been with Abu Dhabi and the UAE for years now. And if you look at what that royal family has done with that country over the last 50 years, it's incredible. And they were the first ones really to do it. They started getting involved in sports and saw the whole sports thing coming. I mean, UFC has been in business with them for like 15 years. And to be honest with you, when the shit hit the fan during COVID, these guys were way ahead of the curve, way ahead of what was going on and how to test and how to create a true bubble. And that was why I ended up doing what I did with Abu Dhabi when this stuff happened. And I think you're going to see more of that. They have the money, Saudi, UAE, Qatar, the list goes on and on. They have the money and they see where this is all going. When you look at live television, now they're streaming and you can dump a whole season on Netflix and you can consume the whole season. The only thing that is really destination television that you have to watch live is live sports.
Right.
But
do you have any moral qualms about the human rights records of some of these countries, or do you think it should be just kept out of sport? That actually, I have a view that almost every country, if you put a real forensic gaze on them about reasons for not to let them have sport on moral grounds, you'd end up having to play everything in Iceland or Switzerland.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one. That's a whole different subject and a whole different conversation. We do business with UAE. These guys have always been great stand-up guys. I'm sure you can find some issues with whatever. You can find some issues with lots of different companies that do business in the United States and anywhere in the world when it comes to human rights and what you think is right and what you think is wrong. I am very comfortable sitting here today telling you that my relationship with the royal family of UAE has been amazing. They've never been anything but great to us and our people. I respect them, and I consider them friends too.
There's been a lot of speculation about a massive potential fight in the octagon between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. You've been quite excited about this. Do you think it's going to happen? Do you think you will be the guy to put it on? And how much money could it generate?
Well, we were talking about that earlier on. I think that is fallen apart. I think that had it happened and had we moved forward and done it, it would have done $1 billion in revenue.
Who would have won?
And that I don't know. I mean, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be Vince McMahon. But who wins and who loses, I don't determine. They do. But I tell you this: it would have been huge. It would have been the biggest fight in the history of the world, and no fight would have. You'd have had to have Trump versus Putin to beat that record.
Well, actually, I interviewed Chris Christie, one of the Republican candidates to be president, and he offered to get in the octagon with Trump. That would be a battle of the heavyweights.
That is true. Yeah, that is true. Listen, a lot of guys say, I want to, throw me in the octagon. And then when it comes down to actually doing it, very few people in the world will actually do it.
I think that's completely right. I mean, I think UFC fighting, of all the forms of fighting that exist, I think it's the most skilled and it's the most courageous, because what they do to each other in that octagon can often be quite terrifying.
Yeah, no, it takes a certain type of person. That's why there's very few people in the world that actually make it into the UFC and get to that level. You have to be a very special, unique, different human being in the way that you're built, made up. Not just forget about talent and the determination and the grit that it takes to go out and train every day to become, a mixed martial arts fighter. But to get to this level of the UFC, very, very few people can do it.
Are we going to see Conor McGregor back in a high-profile fight?
He is back in the gym. He's training. And, I expect to see Conor fighting next year.
Does it matter that he's lost a few big fights recently? Does that impact on his ability to put bums on seats, sell tickets?
Well, here's what happens, Piers, and you know this. I'm sure you've seen this with colleagues and friends and people that you know. Once a certain level of money is attained, to be the person that you were coming up, to be that hungry and work that hard and be that dedicated to the sport or whatever craft it is you do, money changes everything. And Conor McGregor has made that kind of money. And it's not a knock, it's just a fact. I mean, when we sold the company in 2016, this was sort of like a Microsoft of fighting. There were a lot of people that made a lot of money, and a lot of people left, and they went and retired or moved on to, you have to have a certain type of drive to make that kind of money. And you've seen guys in this sport, when they make that kind of money, they'll fight a lot less, like Conor has, or they go on losing streaks because it's just, you are not that same person once you get that kind of money.
You lose the edge, the hunger.
Yeah. The hunger and the drive is not the same. Everything, Conor McGregor is a perfect example. Everything that Conor McGregor ever dreamed of and stuff he couldn't possibly dream of in his life, he has right now, And it's tough to be on a yacht all summer and then say, I got to get back in the gym and start grinding again. And again, it's not a knock. It's just it's the way life is, especially in the fight business.
Social media has been a massive thing for you, and you actually gave one person some great advice, because Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, did not want to go onto social media, and you persuaded him single-handedly. You said, you're mad. You should be on social media. He's now the most followed American man on Instagram. So I think the words he's looking for are, thank you, Dana.
Yeah, The Rock didn't want to be on social media, and I said, you're crazy. I said, do you know how big you'll be on social media? And I kind of explained it to him from a business perspective on why he should do it. And I actually set him up with my social media team, and they got him started and got him going. And I mean, the guy is an absolute juggernaut now on social media. So, yeah.
Is social media, I mean, you've got kids, I've got kids. Social media has a lot of good stuff about it, there's no question. Has some bad stuff. It can be pretty toxic. A lot of kids suffer from anxiety from the stuff that exists on social media. What do you think on the balance sheet? Is it a force for good or not?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of negative things in this world that if you focus on that type of stuff, and if you're not tough enough, and if you're not hard enough for it, let me tell you what, if your feelings get hurt easily, you should stay as far away from social media as possible, okay?
I totally agree.
But social media is one of the greatest marketing tools of all time, right? And what you have to understand is you have to embrace the negativity too. You can't just you're never going to be in a scenario anywhere in life where everything is positive. Oh, everybody loves me and everybody's saying great things about all the things that I do. It's impossible. So if that is even your mindset, you're way too soft for probably a lot of things. But to say that social media is bad, it's the same thing that they said about us when we were younger, that television was horrible for you. Oh my God, if you watch television, this and that and everything. Listen, there's a lot of bad things out there in the world. If you are soft and if you are a total wimp, forget about it. Everything's going to bother you, everything's going to hurt your feelings, and everything's going to give you anxiety.
Where do you sit on this?
Lock yourself up in a closet somewhere and hide from the whole world.
Do you know what, Dana? It's so refreshing to hear this, because so few public figures will actually say this stuff anymore, because they get terrified the woke brigade is going to cancel them for saying things which are so obviously true. And it's refreshing.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear you speak, I think, this guy just says what he thinks. And by the way, I agree with most of what you say.
Yeah, so social media is the greatest marketing tool in the world. If you own a business or you're aspiring to do something, and get your image, your product, your whatever it is out there, you're insane not to be on social media. But don't go on social media and thinking that it's going to... Here's the other thing that you have to understand, too, about the negativity on social media. If you're out there looking to promote something, you have to embrace the negativity, because the negative people are so loony, they're so batshit nuts, that these people will stay on there all day fighting with everybody to make it, and it kicks you up into the algorithm and actually makes your post act more popular. This is what a lot of these big corporations don't understand. Like, these big corporations want to get into social media and everything else. Well, you better get ready for some negativity. Yeah. But most of them can't handle negativity, so they try to stay away from it. We live in a hard world. People are mean, and people say mean things, and people do mean things. That's been that way since the beginning of time, and it's never going to change. So either toughen up or go hide somewhere. Just get out of the way.
We're in a very strange place at the moment in sport, where biological males are beginning to dominate biological females in women's sport because they identify as women. What do you think of that?
I think you know exactly what I think of that. I think that, let me put it to you this way. I have a daughter, okay? And I don't ever want to see a day where somebody who is a biological male is competing against my daughter. So, yeah, no, I think it's another nutty, insane thing that's happening in the world today, that we're all trying to deal with. And I'm just glad there's my daughter's a cheerleader, so she's not playing any competitive sports, but it hasn't happened in the cheer world yet.
I mean, if your daughter wanted to be a fighter, what would you feel about that? Because you put on some very, very big fights involving women. I got to be honest, I never feel that comfortable watching women smacking seven bells out of each other. I know it's hugely popular. I know they love doing it. I know that some of them become superstars and make tons of money. But as the father of an 11-year-old girl myself, I would never want to see her do it. How do you feel about if your daughter wanted to?
I famously got hammered like 10 years ago saying women would never fight in the UFC. And then I met Ronda Rousey. And
I met her on a plane.
She changed my whole...
I met her on a plane and she was...
Oh, you did?
She looked dangerous from about 5 rows away.
Did you talk to her?
I just said hello, but she was... I mean, she had an intimidating aura. And I thought, yeah, I mean, she's someone that clearly revels in that sport, revels in fighting.
Yeah.
And why should I be a sexist pig and think that women shouldn't be able to do what men do?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I had the same thing. But you have to understand the context. At the time, I was trying to get people to accept men fighting in a cage. Women fighting in a cage, I was like, oh my God, this will be next to impossible. But if you look at what we did, almost everything was impossible in building this business to what we built it to today. But what I did learn is that I never expected these women to be as technical and as badass as they have been. And the answer to that question is yes. If my daughter wanted to fight, I would absolutely let her fight. I wouldn't stop my daughter from doing anything or competing in anything that she wanted to do. I would actually be very supportive and help in any way that I possibly could.
Who is the greatest fighter of any kind that you've ever seen?
Of any time, in any sport?
Any time, any sport.
It's so hard to put your thumb on it because I think it's
let me make it an easy
subjective.
question. I'll make it an easy question. If you could choose one person in history, say modern history, last 100 years, to fight literally for your life, who would it be?
Oh, God. You know, I'm a big Ali fan. He was so iconic and he changed so many things in the world and culture and you know, as far as racism and so many different things go. Ali was such a massive figure in life, you know, not just boxing. Was he the greatest ever? He's one of the greatest humans ever. That's a fact.
But that's not the question.
As far as
he did lose 3 times.
I know. You got me on this one. I mean, John Jones, who's in the UFC still, has never been beat.
I know.
This guy has beat everybody. And when you talk about real fighting, you know, when you talk about who the baddest man on the planet is, when you talk about that, the real definition of what that means, you throw 2 guys in a room and who comes out?
Yeah.
Okay? That's the baddest man on the planet. And it is hard to not say that John Jones is that guy right now.
I'll tell you who I would take. I would take Tyson before he went into prison. Mike Tyson. I thought for those
100%, but
for those 3 years.
Tyson doesn't know the ground game. Tyson can't grapple. Tyson's hanging over here. His quote is on the wall over here. Nobody loves Mike Tyson more than I do, believe me. But when you talk about putting 2 guys in a room, who comes out? John Jones has the tools to beat everybody.
I want to come back and just finally talk to you about your health, because you've had some pretty big health scares, and a guy called Gary Brecker, who's going to join you, has pretty much, I think you would say, helped save your life. And we're going to talk about how that's happened and why it had to happen. So we've been joined now by Gary Brecker. I think the easiest thing, Dana, explain to the audience who Gary is and why he's so important to you.
Yeah, so Gary Brecker is a human biologist, and I met him through a longtime friend of mine. And basically, when you go see a doctor about your general health, they want to put you on pills. And at the time that I met him, I was on 3 different medications. And, you know, basically when you look at these different meds, each one of them have, you know, 10 side effects. And I was dealing with 3 different doctors at the time, and they couldn't tell me anything. They couldn't fix what was wrong with my legs. They couldn't really keep my blood pressure under control. They couldn't keep my cholesterol under control. My triglycerides were off the charts. I mean, your show isn't long enough for me to walk you through the laundry list of things that were wrong with me. So I ended up finding out that he was a mortality expert. So he could tell you when you were going to die, and he would be right within a month or so. I became obsessed with this. So that was all I cared about. I didn't believe, I used to call this hippie shit. This is all hippie shit. I don't believe in it. And, you know, I meet the guy. He does my blood work. And he lives in Miami. I live in Vegas. So he keeps calling me saying, you know, I want to come out and walk through your blood work. I said, yeah, I don't care about walking through my blood work. When am I going to die? So he finally talks me into coming out. And he starts going through my blood work. And he starts telling me everything that's wrong with me, with no medical history whatsoever on me. So this is kind of blowing me away. Then he told me what was wrong with my parents, and he was right. So basically,
wow.
he ended up getting me. And he says to me, give me 10 weeks. I promise I'll change your life. So I said, all right, I'll commit 10 weeks to this thing. And to say that this guy has changed my life is the understatement of the century. I mean, as I got to the 10-week point, I started to feel like I was in my 30s again. And now I've been with him a year and a half, and I'm not kidding you, I feel like I'm in my 20s. My level of productivity at work, my cognitive, my physical, I mean, just everything. This guy is a genius, and I tell everybody, you start to get the stuff we were talking about social media. This guy's a scam artist, he's scamming you, this and that. Numbers don't lie. This guy has taken my blood work from absolutely horrible to the best it's ever been in my life. Even my doctors agree with it, and he's brilliant. If this guy called me and told me to squirt hot sauce in my eyes, I'd do it.
Well, before I come to Gary, just quickly, how long did he say you had to live if he hadn't changed things? He
gave me 10.4 years. And
wow.
what's crazy about that is he gave me he said, if you stay on this trajectory that you're on, you're going to live another 10.4 years. And me and my wife both disagree with him. I actually think I wouldn't have made it 10.4 years if I hadn't met him. That's how different I feel compared to where I was. And, you know, when you think of these things, the other big problem for me was sleep apnea and snoring. It was horrible. I couldn't sleep through the night. And you go see a doctor, and what do they tell you to do? Yeah, put this mask on with this machine, and you know what I mean? I don't snore, and I don't have sleep apnea anymore. He's cured everything that was wrong with me.
Let me bring in Gary. So, Gary, I mean, that's one of the great marketing pitches I've heard. In a very short...
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Right, in a short nutshell, what have you done to Dana to make him so enthusiastic and to, in his eyes, prolong his life?
I mean, so Dana had a common precursor for cardiovascular disease called metabolic syndrome. It's actually the leading cause of cardiovascular disease, which is the leading cause of death worldwide. And it's a combination of 5 things: abdominal obesity, low healthy cholesterol, low HDL cholesterol, elevated insulin and blood sugar, elevated cholesterol, and hypertension. And to have any 2 of those 5 is considered to have you're considered to have metabolic syndrome. It's something you should get addressed. It's why I think everybody should get data on their bodies. He had 5 of 5. He had triglycerides through the roof. He had abdominal obesity. He had low healthy levels of cholesterol. He was hyperinsulinemic, meaning his insulin was very high, and he was pre-diabetic. And so, as much of a disaster as that sounds like, you know, all of those things meet at a common hub of lifestyle and diet and supplementation. And, you know, a lot of people talk about the expense that you have to go through to fix that. It wasn't that it was expensive. It would have been expensive if he had not fixed it. But over the course of just 10 weeks, you know, we lowered his triglycerides back into the normal range. And we're talking about triglyceride levels that were 8 times the normal level. Back into the normal range, he started exercising again. He went on a keto reset diet. The majority of what Dana did was really what Dana did himself. I mean, there are people listening to this show right now that because they don't have abdominal obesity think that they can escape metabolic syndrome, and that's patently false. Everybody that's listening to this show right now, you should go to your doctor and get that data. Ask your doctor about metabolic syndrome. And if they don't know what metabolic syndrome is, get a new doctor.
And what were the key things, just quickly, Gary, what were the key things that Dana changed in terms of diet, which made a big difference?
So we did 3 big things with Dana. We did hormone balance, we did nutrient deficiencies, and we did glycemic control, or control his blood sugar. So he went on a strict keto reset diet, which is a very strict, I call it a prescription keto diet, meaning you have to eat exactly what is on this plan morning, noon, and night for 10 weeks, or this situation could get a whole lot worse. So he went on a strict keto diet. He had a strict exercise and workout routine. We also started to use modalities that you can access for free in nature, but he actually bought equipment. He bought a PEMF mat. He bought an oxygen, it's called Hypermax, where he breathes oxygen for 10 to 12 minutes a day while he mildly exercises. And he bought a red light bed. And before everybody jumps on me for saying that you have to buy all this expensive equipment, you can get the same effect by taking your shoes off and grounding on the surface of the earth, learning to do breath work, and exposing your skin to sunlight. So he did magnetism, oxygen, and light with a PMF mat, oxygen, and a red light bed. And he went on a strict 10-week keto reset diet.
It's fascinating. I've got to unfortunately wrap it up. But it is fascinating. I don't know whether to see you or not, Gary, because what I don't want to hear is you look at me and go, Piers, unfortunately, you're leaving us next Tuesday.
I can fix that. And, we'll push it out a couple thousand Tuesdays.
Dana, it's been brilliant. Honestly, I've had such a fascinating time going over your life, your extraordinary career, your amazing achievement with UFC. My sons, I started with this, I'm going to end it. They're all massive UFC fans. They're all very excited about this interview. The first question they're going to ask is, Dad, how did you do? Did Dana think you were any good? That's all they'll care about. So what's the verdict?
Incredible. Great interview. It was a pleasure. And tell your boys thank you. I really appreciate the support.
Actually, what they really want to hear, Dana, is can they have tickets to your next fight?
Is what? Yeah, they're invited to any fights they ever want to come to. Anywhere in the world, you just let me know, and I got them.
Well, it's very kind. You're going to wish you'd never said those words, but they will be jumping off the sofa listening to that. Dana White, you're a phenomenon. The FT piece I referenced earlier, the Financial Times, they summed up your great talent like this. They said he can transfer his immense excitement to others with almost no loss of energy. It's the greatest thing to watch in the world. To him, he's not manipulating you. He's just an enthusiast. You're one of life's enthusiasts, which, given where you came from and the hardship you overcame and the lack of love from your parents, is a pretty amazing achievement. So I congratulate you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
How would you like to be remembered? If you could write your own tombstone, what would you say?
I said it many times. We talked about it here today. The only thing I care about is how my kids remember me and what they think when I'm gone. All this other stuff means nothing to me. I'm very fortunate that I get to do what I love to do every day, and I still am very passionate about it. But at the end of the day, it's all about how I was as a father and what my kids think.
I couldn't agree more. Dana White, what a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Likewise. Thank you.